before I start the painting, I'm going to do a little demo here, mini demo, using my candle wax, because the blackthorn is strangely kind of soft and sparkling, and it's cloud-like. It's just got a sort of nebulous thing. The tiny flowers are fully out, and the stamens are giving us an additional sense of soft texture. So I wonder whether a little bit of candle wax might actually help to produce that. So if you want to do that, what I suggest is that you just play with the candle wax a little bit, making the kind of marks that you think might be appropriate on a spare bit of paper, and then mix some colour. Perhaps I'll mix some Booker's green. So I've got my bit of Booker's green, and I can brush it over and reveal those marks. And I think that sort of texture might actually be quite helpful, probably in conjunction with masking fluid, to get that sort of softly glittering quality of this blossom. So that's what I'm going to do. First of all, I'll do a little bit of drawing, and I'll keep my board this way. The photograph is actually vertical, but I'm going to just, if I move this vertical, you don't see the whole of my paper, so I'll keep it this way so that you can see that. And obviously I'll just use part of it. So maybe something like that. Okay, now we have most of the surface of this image. Most of this image is taken up by the bank and the blackthorn, which is close to the eye. The bank really, and the nettles and so on, kind of start here. And I'm going to probably make less of that because the proportion of my rectangle is a little bit more stunted than the image I've got here. So, but I'm going to just suggest some little bit of texture and blossom, and then coming up here, you've got some spikes of blossom as well. So I'm just kind of doing a rough sense of the fingers of blossom coming out like that. And obviously there are other fingers of blossom that are within the texture of the bush. And then the rest of the picture space is this little snippet of the view, and we've got a little bit of a lane, gentle diagonal, nothing dramatic like last week, the week before, just a gentle diagonal, a little bit of the grassy centre, softly like that. And then we've got a bank, and we've got these old oak trees springing up from a broken wall, I think it is here, some sort of a broken wall or something here. So there's a couple of trees we can put in, and this wandering branch, some other wandering branches, and then this other tree. And then we've got some little posts or bushes or something here. You can see about 4 of those. part of a hedge or something. Then we have a little sliver of lightly lit meadow over here somewhere. Isn't really taller. And yeah, something like that. And then in the distance, trees, thicket of trees really, shadowy trees, a little bit of sunlight, a little bit of sky showing. So that's the sort of just roughed in the composition. And then here we've got sort of shapes of blossom. I'm going to put less of the this part of the composition in, less of the foreground metals and so on. And there is a little bit more with the blossom. A bit more with that. Right. Okay. Now I've drawn some fingers of blossom, and what I'm going to do is try to follow those as much as I can with the candle wax, so that I'm roughly sure of where my candle wax is, because it leaves a slight shine on the paper, which you can just about see, but you know, I'm not it's not guaranteeing that I'm going to put the masking fluid in the right place. So just going to, but it doesn't really matter. I don't think it will really matter if I miss a little bit and get some extra sparkle here and there, where maybe there isn't any kind of masking fluid blossom. The general shapes and the lightness and softness of the blossom, I think, would be enhanced by that. So the blossoms grow in little spikes along quite very dark twigs, hence the name Blackthorn. And so I'm scumbling really with this. I'm using a tip, and I'm using a little bulge from the chopped edges of this candle, so that I can put it more or less where I want it. And I'm going to close that little gap in the centre of it and have a bit less of that texture of dried twigs, whatever it is. A bit more blackthorn. So hopefully that sort of dispersed that sparkling texture over the surface. Now I'm going to get my masking fluid, drawing gum, and I'm going to use my colour shaper, which is my solid brush with a kind of rubbery solid tip, and I'm going to now I'm going to try to draw in some more particular kind of blossom shapes. I have to do it quite quickly, so it will be an impression. So I quite like these little brushes, these rubber brushes. You can roll around on the tip and create quite nice marks with the tip of them. Delicate marks. So my eye is flickering back and forth between the image, the photograph that I've got on my laptop here, and the painting, and trying to just give this sort of gentle frothy quality to the sort of softly linear quality as these little flowers are arranged along the twigs. You might take more time over this. I expect you will. Suggestion. Awesome. The masking fluid is quite liquid. It's quite a new bottle, and it's quite blobby. But I'm not going to worry about that. It'll hopefully be okay. So I'm doing it pretty quickly, but I think you get the idea. I'm still drawing with it actually. I'm trying to draw the shapes of the blossom as they are dispersed along the twigs. Those shapes. I'm not trying to generalize too much, although I'm working quickly. I'm trying to really get a sense of that. So there are also some very light little streaks of light on these grasses. So maybe I'll add a few of those in among the another texture. Let's do that like that. Okay. Now I have to spend a little while drying that. And what I'll do is I will just dab it as I dry. I'll lightly dab it when it's dry enough to dab, just to take out the centre so that it speeds it up for you. I think that's pretty much dry. Now I need to mix a few colours, and I think the first one I'm going to mix will be a pinky kind of grey for the sunlit lane, and I'm going to start with some light red, and I'm going to add some alizarin crimson. So that's light red and alizarin crimson. And a little bit of permanent violet to start with. Let's see what that gives us. I'm going to add a little touch of ultramarine blue to that, just to cool it down a little bit more. And some water to thin it. Okay. So that was light red with a little bit of alizarin crimson, and you could probably get away with not putting in the violet. You could just go with a little bit of ultramarine. So I need a green, and I've got hooker's green here, so I'm going to add a bit more hooker's green to my little reservoir of that colour. I may adjust that as I go, but that will be a base. I need a little bit of lemon yellow or cadmium lemon for sunlight, and if it's got a bit of hooker's green in it, so much the better. Just with this light tint of green. And I need perhaps cobalt blue for the hint of sky. Could be cobalt or it could be cerulean if you prefer, or Prussian blue. Could be Prussian blue. So a little hint of that. There will be other mixes, but I will start off with those. And I'm going to start off with a little bit of sky. Pop it straight across. It doesn't show in many places. I can give it a little bit of a base. So I'll wait for that to dry. While that's drying, I'm going to put a little bit of tint into the lane. Let's see how that looks. A bit more water, lighten it just a little. So that's my underpainting of the lane. And the lane is barred with sunlight, so I want to try to get that quality of the sunlight in the lane. I could even take that, I think it wouldn't hurt to take this colour up and over in the shadow areas. That might beautify those a little bit as we continue to paint. Something like that. And while that is damp, perhaps I need to mix from ultramarine blue and a little bit of light red, a nice a grey to suggest the pattern of light and shade on the road. I can do that with this grey. It's ultramarine blue and light red. And you might want to wait a little while for your underpainting to dry. This is pretty wet into wet, wet into damp. I won't have to wait very long for this to become nearly damp, so that my bars of sunlight move less far into the wash. Depends on how much freedom of movement you want from that. So again, I think the shadow colour, I know that there's green up here and other colours, but I'm going to use the shadow colour to start putting in these shadowy fall trees and other things behind here. Suggest those things in the background there. I'm going to let that dry a little bit, and while that is drying, I'm going to try out my Hooker's Green, which I could use to start with on these areas of bank. I'm going to leave some gaps and allow kind of other colours to creep in. And the bush itself doesn't seem to be very much green behind that, so it's quite a sort of sticky, dry sort of thing. So there's a lot of nettle growth and so on down here, but I'm not going to be specific about that, given the time constraints of this live demo. I'm just going to suggest the nettles in there, kind of growing along the bank behind this little bush. And then I think in this part, there's quite a lot of shadowy, dark brown. So I'm going to use my same light red and ultramarine to mix a kind of shadowy dark colour. And I'm going to just pop that on and let it merge with what I've done. Obviously, the masking fluid and the candle wax, they won't show until I put something behind them. So this seems to be quite a good colour to suggest the shadowy interior of this little tree. And so I'm going to sort of do that. And maybe also pop some in a bit lower down to kind of give form to the closer part of the bank. And if you want to be more specific about what's growing here, obviously you can. Take a bit of time and draw in those shapes, those one or two of those leaves, to suggest the identity of those things. I'm not going to worry about that in this study. While that is drying, I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to put in some sunlight on that far meadow. And then I think Hooker's green and a little bit of that grey that I mixed perhaps might be wanted to modulate a sort of softer green for the trees and bushes growing up here. Let's start to put those in with a softer green made from Hooker's green and the grey that I've just mixed. So I'm just using the rest of that. Use what's available and see what you can do with these same pigments. So there's lots of sort of hints of texture and so on that you can put in. Maybe you could do it with a sponge if you wanted that delicate frothiness. But I'm just going to pop it in with my number 12 round. And I will need to add more and darker and so on here. But I'm going to let that dry first. In fact, what I could do is with my Hooker's green and perhaps some of the violet, permanent violet, make it kind of slightly grayer green, and add more shadowiness in the background here as well. So Hooker's green with some permanent violet will give me a nice sort of grey green. If you want some sunlight in there, pop in some lemon yellow. I'm just trying to sort of build up now a sense of the shadiness, kind of mottled shadiness of this little bit of lane we've got here. So this neutralized or partly neutralized green is quite useful for doing the shadow on the bank. And maybe a little hint of green up the lane in the centre there. Some of that is in sunlight, so you might even want to get some of your lemon yellow and hint at a little bit of sunlight there too. I was just using the side of my brush and some water just to spread that and soften it a little bit. So I'm going to let that dry again, and coming back to this, it's still a bit patchy, it's still a little bit wet, a little bit damp here and there. So I'm going to ask myself, how can I use that, or can I use that? what do I need to do meanwhile? I think maybe it's patchy, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my hairdryer and dry it a little bit. Okay, most of those little areas of wet are pretty much dry. There are one or two wet bits, but I'm going to plough on with, I'm thinking I quite like to use a quite fine brush, so a number 4 round, or yeah, I'll use, not that much. My daughter went off with all my brushes yesterday. So, what's I got here? This is I think this is a number 6 round. So, or I could use the side of my small filbert. I think I'll do that. What I want to do is, with a dark brown, just pop in some twigs on this little bush. So I'm just going to use the narrow side of this filbert to suggest some blackthorn twigs. I'm partly looking and partly inventing here to incorporate what I've done with what I'm looking at. Quite a lot of little crisscrossing of dark and light twigs. So just adding a little bit of texture on these grasses. And shadiness with this with sepia. I'm using sepia just to add that bit of detailing, storytelling about the shapes of the little blackthorn twigs. Okay. I hope this filbert does the job. Right, now what do I need? Yes, I could use sepia a little bit in the background to just perhaps define some of these shadowy branches, or we could use sepia with some blue added if you want it less brown. In fact, I think I do want it less brown. I'm going to add a little bit of blue to it, ultramarine blue again, just to slightly grey that, make it less brown. Yeah. To give us a little bit of shadow in the lane. and a little bit of definition there, a bit of shadow on the bank, and these bushy things, I'm not quite sure I can. It looks like a hedge which has been sort of cut off at a funny angle. Anyway, suggest a shape, a hedge there. And shadowiness. And perhaps lighten it a little bit more water in there, just to come back to the shadowy bars of light across the name. Want a little bit more dramatic light. You can add it wet on dry. Just scoop the brush across a little bit, get a sense of light and shade. There's a lot more branching and shadowiness here potentially. These are probably quite big trees overlooking the lane here. I'll just suggest a little bit there with the brush, with my little filbert. Okay, it's time to take the masking fluid, I think, although actually I can see a little bit up here that I haven't quite covered yet. So maybe I should take some dilute grey over this part, just to cover up the white paper, so that I get my the masking fluid shapes, which is the ones I want. Okay, so I think they're pretty much covered. Now, time to dry up the hairdryer and take the masking fluid off. Hopefully that's dry. So, just quickly rub these bits of rubber gum off, see what we've got, and then they'll probably need a little bit of working in, light and shade, something. That's most of it off. We'll call that done. Okay, so I've got all these little white shapes, and I'm just going to tint them in a little bit. I'm going to tint in the tinting. I'm going to tint in the pale grasses, the dead grasses, with a little bit of raw sienna, just to kind of give those a little bit of yellowy dead twigginess, and work them a little bit more to the picture surface. They otherwise jump out quite a bit. So that's settled them in a little bit. And then the blossom has got some light and shade on it. And I think I'm going to use the same blue I used for the sky. I'm going to use a little bit of cobalt blue just to hint at the shade on some of this blossom. So using my little baby filbert again. Just get some cobalt blue going on this. Not everywhere, but just where I see a hint of shade. To give the blossom sort of roundness, form, and to let some of it go behind other bits of it. So you can see some light and shade in there, and just helping that contrast to come forward. Obviously, this won't take on the texture of the candle, but it will take on where the masking fluid was. Just hinting at the cast light flowers. A little bit more body and integrating those shapes into the light and shade on the in the bank here. Okay, I'm going to leave it like that.